Good morning, everyone. This is Jeff with Walk and Talk with Word Jeff. Got a story to tell you this morning about a little weevil. Weevils are something that gets in your cream of wheat, gets in your farina as eggs, and they actually hatch out in your food. They're harmless little guys, but still gross. Well, in prison, every now and then you get such large quantities of farina most of the time. And every great once in a while, you'll find weevils in them. Well, let me tell you a story about one time we found weevils during chow. Normally, it's caught way before the inmates come into the chow hall. The food supervisor's job is to make sure that these weevils are not in there. Well, this particular day, I was on midnights. We were serving the chow line for breakfast. And it was like, I've told you this before, we start chow at 4:30 in the morning. And this was like 5 o'clock in the morning. We finally got our first group in. We was already running a little late. Well, when we got into they got into the chow hall and got their farina in their bowls, one of the inmates came up to me. He said, "Hey, Cap," I was a captain. I was a shift commander at that time. And I just happened to be standing there in the kitchen with the lieutenants and things, just talking and things. And the inmate said, "Hey, Cap," he said, "I've got something in my farina that's crawling around." I said, "You do?" Well, immediately my sensors went off. Like, that's got to be a weevil. I said, "Bring it up here and let me look at it, man." So he goes and he gets it. Well, in the meantime, other inmates are starting to discover these moving weevils in their farina. Well, things started getting a little heated. Inmates started screaming how we was putting bugs in the food. Now we couldn't serve them anything that was even decent to eat. Now I will stop the story there to tell you about how I have dealt with inmates my whole life. I was an officer, a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, a major, assistant warden, and a warden. I worked every rank and worked adequate years at every rank. And like I've told you all before, some of my videos, I worked a lot of times in the cell houses. So I knew people. I knew who was in charge as the gang chiefs and all that. I knew all that stuff. And had a very good working relationship with most inmates. And the reason I did was because I was fair with all of them. I always treated them the way they treated me. If you want to treat me like a man, I'll treat you like a man, and we will iron things out. You'll do your time fine, and I'll do my time fine, and we'll all, it'll be a great day. And that's the way I just handle my business. Well, being inside the cell houses and the units and out on the yards and gyms and all that stuff, I talked to several inmates. And I kind of got a little bit of a relationship with a lot of them, just talking, And they found out that real quick that I was the guy that treated them fair. So they always came to me when there was a problem, when I was out and about. Well, even as a captain, they would come to me instead of the lieutenant or the sergeant. Not saying anything bad about the lieutenants and the sergeants. It's just I had many years of experience and many years of dealing with inmates. From the inmate who was a neutron, from the bottom of the pile as far as inmates go, all the way to the gang chiefs. And by working out there, I knew who everyone was. I knew what their places were in their gangs. Well, back to the story, back into the kitchen. That particular morning, there was 2 gang chiefs in there with 2 of the major gangs in our facility. And they were listening to all their little people talking about these weevils being in their farina. And I knew that things were getting ready to get out of control, because there's a couple things that you don't mess with in prison when it deals with inmates. You don't mess with their food. You don't mess with their visitation. You don't mess with their phone calls. You don't mess with their commissary. And there's a couple other things that's important to them. Food is up there on one of the top 5 on the list. So anyway, the officers and I were standing there talking about this weevil situation. This gang chief is out there in the middle of the dining room, and his little minions all started getting around him and complaining to him, because that's their chain of command. They go to their chief first before they go to anybody else. Well, I saw all this taking place, and there was about 250 inmates in the chow hall at the time. Probably about 200 of those were hooked up in gangs. And it was, like I said, there was two different factions. So I saw the one gang chief, and he finally made eye contact with me. I stared at him for a minute. He finally made eye contact with me, and I waved my arms. I said, come here, let me talk to you. He wouldn't come over there. No, he shook his head. No, he's not right now. The other inmate, who was the gang chief, was sitting on the opposite side of the dining room. The dining room is divided into two dining halls. He was having the same thing on his side. People all complaining about these weevils in their farina. So finally, I decided something's got to break here, because these guys are getting really agitated and irritated. And the food supervisor was standing there, and I said, "So what is going on, man?" I said, "These guys are finding all kind of weevils in their farina." He said, "Oh, shouldn't." He said, "I got that fresh out of the bag." I said, "We all know fresh out of the bag of farina does not mean that there's no weevils." I said, "They're saying there's weevils in there," and I said, "and I've seen them myself." I said, "We have got to do something right now." So as the inmates started stirring around and starting to get a little louder and louder, I walked out into the dining hall and into where all the inmates were, and walked straight up to one of the gang chiefs. I said, "Hey," I said, "I'm gonna fix this, man." He looked at me and said, "Cap, you better." He said, these people ain't gonna eat bugs." I said, "I don't blame them." I said, "I wouldn't eat bugs either, man." I said, "But give me a chance. Give me a chance to fix it. And that's all I'm asking you." And he looked at me kind of funny, and he said, "All right, Cap." He said, I'm gonna give you a shot." He said, "I'll give you a shot to fix it." He said, you're a good man." He said, "You're a man of your word." He said, I'm gonna give you a shot." I said, "All right." I went back to the food supervisor and said, "Get that off the line right now." I said, "What else have you got to fix?" He said, "I don't have anything else." And I said, "We need something to fix right now." I said, "Because they're not eating this farina. It's got bugs in it, man. It's got weevils." Weevil is a beetle, basically, and they're harmless little guys, but yet they're still gross, you know. And they're crawling around in these people's food. So the food supervisor wanted to argue with me a little bit. Finally, I had to really get on him and tell him to find something else right now for chow. And what they'd served that morning was farina, a pretty good amount of it, with a couple of boiled eggs and a couple of pieces of toast or whatever it was. So anyway, the inmates were still around their gang chiefs, and I went over and I basically did the same thing. I didn't get along as good with the other gang chief as I did the first one I talked to, but I told him what I was going to do. I was going to take care of it, and he just kind of looked at me and said, "Yeah, whatever," you know, because he was thinking, "We're getting ready to take care of it if you don't." So I went back to the food supervisor, and we walked back to the kitchen together. I said, "You show me what you got to eat." I told all those inmates, I said, "Sit still, don't move. Eat your eggs if you want, they're good. Eat your toast if you want, they're good. Leave the farina alone, of course." And so they all went out there and started eating their eggs and things, and kind of listened to me, which was really a good thing. So went back to the kitchen. There was some boxes of cereal and a whole lot of milk. I said, "We're serving these guys cereal and milk." He said, "We can't do that, man." The food supervisor said, "You can't do that, man." He said, "We're serving that for tomorrow, for breakfast." I said, "You've got 24 hours to figure out what to fix for breakfast tomorrow. Today you're gonna give them cereal and milk, and you're gonna give them a lot of it." Like I said, we was already running late on our chow lines. So got the inmates all together in the back, the workers, to get the cereal and the milk all together to put out on the front line. And the inmates immediately started to jump up to go get cereal and milk, and I had to holler at them. I said, No. I said, "What I want you guys to do," and I was talking very loud, hollering basically, because you have to over, a dining hall of 250 men. I told every one of them, I said, "What we're going to do is we're going to start all over." I said, "Everybody, we're going to release you by rows. Put your trays in the window," which that's where they put their dirty dishes. I said, "Put your trays in the window and leave the dining hall." Oh, they were throwing a fit. "We leave, you ain't going to let us come back." I said, "You know me." I said, "I tell you, I'm gonna bring you back to eat. I'm gonna bring you back to eat." And the gang chiefs, thank goodness the gang chiefs were in there. They have more control over their people than we do, and that's just the facts of the matter. So anyway, the chiefs had already told me they were going to give me a shot. I ran them all out of the dining room, row at a time. A lot of grumbling, a lot of mumbling, you know, how they were going to do this and going to do that if they don't get to eat. And I kept assuring them, you're going to eat. Told the officers and the lieutenants that were in there, I said, make sure they know they're coming right back. Ran them all out, put all the trays in the window. We started chow all over. And the food supervisor had the nerve to say, are we going to give them eggs again too? I said, you better believe you're going to give them eggs again too, and you're going to boil more if you need them. I said, you screwed this whole thing up. I said, you've got every one of us killed in here. I said, you need to do your job is what you need to do. And I was angry at him, because you just don't realize what that can cause in an institution, in a chow hall with a lot of inmates already early of a morning. They don't wake up in a good mood. And you've got to make sure that your chow's at least right. So anyway, we ran them all out, got them all back. I even put them back up. I even put them in their wings in their unit. I said, all right, we're starting chow line all over again. We didn't get chow line started back up to like 6 a.m. We all got off at 7. Chow always took 2 hours. So I called those guys right back out, just like I told them I would. Ran them through the line, got cold cereal. They got 2 eggs, even more toast. They actually got to eat some of their breakfast twice, but you know, whatever. They also had to deal with the weevils in their farina. So anyway, it all worked out good. It all worked out okay. And I'm not bragging and patting myself on the back here, but it was because of the respect that I had with these gang chiefs and several of the other inmates. They knew what I told them was fact, and they knew when I told them that I was going to do something, that I did it. And I made my career with inmates of using that philosophy. If you give a man your word, follow through whatever it takes. And don't give a word that you think that you can't do, because if you do and you don't do it, you lose all your respect. So I think, and a lot of the lieutenants think, that due to the respect that they had for me, standing there in the chow hall, you know, I'm standing there as a 20-year veteran, and a lot of those inmates have basically grown up with me, guys who were doing 30, 40 years. They knew me. And I think with the respect that they had for me, that I think they went ahead and they did what I said. And by doing that, and it all worked out the way it did, it gained me a lot of credits. In other words, as the inmates always said, street creds. I got street creds now. And they knew what I said I meant. But anyway, again, that was not to pat myself on the back and toot my own horn for having all this respect from these inmates, because you know, just as apt, inmate is just as apt to snap and go off and you not be able to do a thing about it. But anyway, it all worked out fine, all worked out good. And like I said, chow was already running late. It was 8 o'clock. We still weren't finished at 8 o'clock. I stayed. I figured I had better stay since I'm the one who basically started this whole avalanche of being late. I stayed late. I even stayed a little later because the food supervisor and I had a long talk in the captain's office after chow was over with. And I pretty much told him how close we were to losing a facility, losing the kitchen over his not doing his job, basically. But anyway, we had a good talk, a good firm talk. The food supervisor was okay after that. Of course, I didn't write it up. We had incident reports and things that we wrote. I didn't write him up specifically, but he knew it was his fault. I knew it was his fault, and we left it at that. So I just dealt with him, just him and I. But anyway, that's my story today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, comment on my page, and also too, if you got anybody that you think might like these stories, share it to them, and tell them about my page. I appreciate it. I'm out.